The murder of George Floyd here, the spark that ignited protests across the country. In Minneapolis, there were protests again last night, but after days of violent protests, looting, arson, and attacks on police, these protests were relatively under control. Protesters were met with the full force of the state's National Guard, mobilized in record force for the first time in 164 years. State officials here warning that some of the rioters inciting chaos are coming from out of state to perpetuate violence, not protest the death of George Floyd. Officials here asking everyone to stay home so they can better separate the peaceful protesters from the agitators. And joining me now is someone who has personally experienced the loss of a loved one to police violence. Clarence Castile's nephew, Philando Castile, was killed by a suburban St. Paul officer 4 years ago. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. As you watch the protests that are happening, the violence, the rioting, what goes through your mind?
A lot of things go through my mind. The anger, the mistrust, the devastation of losing someone to police violence is horrible for everybody. And what happened to George Floyd just brought back so many memories, and the pain of seeing someone suffer at the hands of law enforcement like that.
Your nephew was killed in 2016, just several miles from here. You've since become a community advocate. You know this community well. Why do you think this keeps happening?
In my opinion, I would think it keeps happening because those perpetrators of these particular crimes, killing African-American men, aren't being held accountable the way they should be. They aren't being punished for committing these crimes. And it will continue to happen when there's no accountability.
We've seen protests now happening all over the country, from coast to coast. Do you think that there is real change that is possible?
There is change that is possible if people start being held accountable for the wrongs that they do. We all start respecting one another and treated in a more humane way. African Americans historically have been treated horribly for the last 500 years. And this riot, this type of protesting is the result of us not being treated in a humane way, the injustice that's been going on, and people have just had enough. And this is how people react when they've had enough.
We heard Alex Perez say earlier this morning, people are just tired of being sick and tired. Mr. Castile, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it. And guys, I covered his nephew's case back in 2016. I remember the protests and the outrage, and that is just one of the cases that is part of this exhaustion that we've talked so much about in the last few days that we're now seeing spilling over, guys.
Yes, it's not just the George Floyd case, as horrifying as that was. It is decades and centuries of history before it that is, as we're seeing now and as many are saying now, bubbling over. Eva, thank you for...
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.